What's up, YouTube? It's Josh here, Little Desert Farm. I want to give you guys a little tour of the ironwood trees and what I know about them, and maybe you guys can tell me something I don't know about them. They're a really cool tree. The more I learn about them, the more I want to learn more. See, here's a bigger version. Ironwood tree is a desert tree, a hardwood tree. And we've got 10 or 11 of them on the property. They're maybe 20, 25 foot tall on some of these big guys here. There's a little one here and a big one behind it. The little one's maybe 10 feet, maybe a couple branches a little higher than that. And the big ones, yeah, about 20 foot tall or so. They're like a big bush is kind of a good description of the tree. And we've trimmed all these up when we bought the property so that they resemble more of a tree. They're a little more neat and tidy. On the other side of my fence here, there's just wild desert, and the trees get pretty bushy. A lot of branches get close to the ground. You can see this one here I'm going to trim up and get some of these branches that are closer to the ground. Clean them up so you can walk underneath them without hitting your head. You can see how it grows to the ground there. And yeah, it's a really interesting plant. It's got a lot of beneficial stuff for the desert. It grows seed pods that you can eat. This here's the other main plant that is found around here. This is a creosote bush. I'm not too sure what kind of benefits that has. We're still learning about what we've got here on the property. But the ironwood tree is a pretty cool tree. I'm going to show you a couple of them here. They grow a seed pod. It looks kind of like a pea pod. 2 to 3 seeds in each pod, and they drop those once a year. And they drop a lot of those. And the new growth is this green color. I'll zoom in here a little bit. You can see the thorns on this thing. The thorns they're something else. They get you. And then as the tree gets older, it turns this gray color. And then as it gets older than that, it grows a bark like any other tree you'd be familiar with. And it's a very hardy desert plant. It can tolerate a lot of drought. See, here's an older tree. And it has a bark on it like you would see on any other tree, a pine tree, oak tree, maple tree. But when they're younger, they got these nasty thorns on them. They go right through your gloves, and they tear you up pretty good. It's a lot of fun when you're trying to trim them up. I'm not too sure how old these trees are, but I'd have to guess they're in the neighborhood of 20, 30 or more years old, some of these bigger trees. And you can see how right out of the middle of the trunk, out of the bark, you'll get some new green that grows. And that'll eventually turn into new branches. It's really hard to kill these trees as far as drought. Pretty neat tree. And when they drop all the seed pods, they all land underneath the tree. And they start to sprout. I'll show you some little sprouts here. But not too many of these sprouts survive. They dry out and they die. If you notice, all of these trees that I have, they follow this wash that goes through my yard. So when it rains really heavy and the wash runs, it brings a lot of water, and these trees, they soak up all the water and they store it in the root ball area, and that's how they last months at a time without any rain. But you see this tree here, it's got a lot of greens growing right out of the bark. And those will all turn into new branches. You can see how old this bark is. The branches start out green, and then they kind of turn this green-brown color, and then they turn gray. And then after gray, they lose their thorns, and it turns into bark. And yeah, I'm going to show you one of the older trees that we have out here. This one, when we moved here, we thought it was dead, so we cleaned up all around it, trimmed off a lot of dead stuff, but we left it because it was really neat, kind of like an art piece. It gave us a little bit of decoration in our yard. So we just left it alone, kind of like a skeleton, old fossil type of a tree. You can see it's got some marks from, I don't know, woodpeckers or what they were, some kind of beetles. Maybe that's where old branches used to be, I'm not too sure. But it's a really cool looking tree stump we got here, so we left it. Kind of an art piece for the yard. Didn't think a whole lot of it and just left it. Let it do its thing. You can see here, out of nowhere, there's a bunch of new green growth. So it's not dead. So we don't really water it. It just gets water when it rains. You can see this new green growing out of there. So it's really a cool tree, the ironwood, how it can survive this desert temperatures and droughts and just our climate in general. But yeah, a lot of these big trees that you see here, they're all ironwoods. Very similar to a mesquite tree. Very slow growing. Grows lots of little twiggy branches, but it takes a long time for them to get some good diameter, good size to them. So, as I said, you can see them going along our wash. I plan on planting some seeds. I gathered a lot of seeds this year. You can see more of the green just grows right out of the middle of the bark. And as it gets more mature, it turns this gray color. Still has lots of thorns on it. And then the gray turns into a bark. And once it gets barky, the thorns go away. Over here we got a bunch of weeds. As I cross over the wash here, I just noticed this today. This is, I don't want to say a baby, but a very young ironwood tree. Now that I noticed it, I'm planning on taking care of it and making sure that it grows into a big tree. The tree's very green right now. There's all the way to the bottom, it's green. So as it gets older and more mature, it'll turn more of a gray color, and then it'll turn into bark. It'll grow more new green leaves. See some of the new fresh growth green. This tree's doing very well. We've had a lot of rain this year, so our wash here, which is very sandy, when it runs like a river, and it brings a lot of sand through it, and the sand stays here. And along the sides is where the trees tend to grow large because they can stay out of the running water in the wash, and they don't get swept away, and they get the benefits of all the water that comes through here. Makes the ground nice and wet, and they soak it up, and they have a ability to store it in their root system. A lot of these other little bushy things you see here, those are just weeds. My wife's looked into some of these and trying to figure out what type of plants they are. And I think she said some of them are edible. Some of them have some medicinal values to them. This one over here we see a lot of in the yard. All the stems are nice red color. And I'm not too sure what the plant is, but my wife said she looked it up and it's edible. Here's another one, same thing. As you can see here, these are some baby ironwoods. They're so small. The seeds, there's so many seeds that come off of the tree. A lot of the seeds tend to sprout. But our temperatures are so hot and dry that a lot of these little tiny plants can't survive the lack of water for such a long period of time, and they dry out and die. A lot of these weeds and even the grass, same thing. When we don't get rain, it dries out and dies. But the ironwood and the creosote bush, I'll show you over my fence here onto the property that's next to mine. This stuff here is just natural. And you can see how they just everything gets really bushy. And the leaves and the branches grow all the way to the ground. And when it rains, they get water and they store it underground by their roots. But when they're small, they can't store enough water. And we can go quite a few months without rain or in between rains. But a lot of these plants can't handle that kind of sustained drought, and they dry up. But when the trees get older and bigger, their root system can harness that water and moisture and store it. You can see this is on the other side of my fence here. But the size of it looks like two tree trunks growing out of the ground that start to branch off. And one's maybe a good 2 foot around, and the other one's, yeah, not too far behind that. Some old growth here. So one of the things we like to do is take care of our natural environment and not try to just tear it all out. This stuff was here a long time before we were, so we want to let it stay and keep it and help it. So you can see how small this tree is versus how big this tree is. That's got quite a few years on it. So there's a little tour of the ironwoods. So hopefully you learned something, and maybe if you got some comments, you can teach me something. Love to learn about these ironwood trees. So take it easy, YouTube. Till next time. Later.